Okay, the meeting is now live streaming. You can start whenever you and Ashley are ready.
Ashley, are you ready to go?
Yes, we're ready to go.
Okay, well, I would like to call the Cuyahoga County Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Monday, March 29th, 2021 to order and ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Mr. Schrein. Mr. Schrein is absent at the moment. Ms. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no public comment was submitted.
Thank you very much. Item number 4 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the March 15th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion regarding those minutes?
So moved.
Second, Ann Baker.
So I heard a motion from Councilman Tuma and a second from Councilwoman Baker almost simultaneously. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the ayes have it, and the minutes of the meeting from March 15th, 2021 are approved. Item 5 on our agenda is one legislative item referred to the committee. That's Resolution 2021-0087.
Resolution number 2021-0087, authorizing an amendment to contract number 665 with Point Blank Solutions Ltd. for software and maintenance on the Justice Matters and DocuPoint case and document management systems for the period February 29, 2016 to February 28, 2021, to extend the time period to February 28, 2026, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $3,120,000.
Thank you very much. That item is now before the committee. My understanding is that Jim Ginley is going to present this resolution on behalf of the administration.
Yes, this is Jim Ginley. Should I start?
Yes, you may.
All right. This is a contract amendment from a prior 5-year contract that expired at the end of February to manage our case processing system, which is Point Blank. And if you have any questions, it's for another 5-year interval. I can answer them.
Okay, let's see what questions my colleagues have. Hearing none immediately, I'll start with some questions. Was there any kind of a competitive process on this, or was this a part of a contract that provided for extensions? What's the nature of this?
It was a sole source before. I believe it still is one. And then we followed the procedure, which was new to me, where we had an affidavit posted for 5 days from the vendor that was inviting any, I don't know, participation from outsiders or whatever. And I understand we didn't get any of that.
And Mr. Ginley, how does the cost of this contract going forward compare with the cost that's currently in effect?
The current cost is $50,000 a month for 5 years. That was the contract prior. And the new contract is still $50,000 with the invoices that would come to us at the end of each month. There's another $120,000 factored into the $3 million, so it's $3,120,000. The 120 is an item that if at some point, and this has happened before, but it's never come to fruition, where there would be an interface between the case processing system of the prosecutor and the court's case processing system, so that information is transferred and shared and interfaced without having to re-input a lot of data, which is happening now. But I don't know if that's going to come, like I said, come to fruition.
So are you actively pursuing developing that kind of interface?
Yeah, we are. There's still negotiation or discussion that has to occur with, say, for instance, the Court of Common Pleas. But that's something that we're working on. Again, it was a goal that was, in the past, but it was never actually attained.
And is it clear that the technology is available to do so if we can get the cooperation of the interested parties?
Yes, that's where the 120 would come into play.
Are there any other questions by my colleagues?
Chairman Miller.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to clarify. Did you say there was an increase in the contract, or is it the same?
Well, there's a 4% increase, but it's really not the increase in the monthly fee. It's the addition of $120,000 into the amount if interface work were to commence. Again, I don't know if that's going to happen. There has to be a mutual agreement between the prosecutor and the other parties, which would be the court system.
And this is strictly for the prosecutor, or do the public defenders also have access to this?
This is the prosecutor's case processing system. It's for internal management of all the cases that are on the dockets in the court. And this is an internal mechanism.
Okay, and then I guess the only other question that I have is what's our termination clause if something better or
I'd have to research the contract for the termination clause. I'm sure it's a standard one, but I'd have to look at it. Can I get back to you on that? I don't want to postpone this, or should I try to get the answer right now from our IT department?
If you could. I mean, I don't think that it's going to, I don't know that it would hold us up, but I would like to know. Just
okay. Hold on 1 second. Once they're right next door.
Okay.
Dale, I have just a quick question for you.
Yes.
So it says 100% funded by the general fund. Is this money that was set aside in the budget for the prosecutor's office?
I would certainly expect so, because this is a regular ongoing contract, but we can confirm that with Mr. Ginley.
It is. It's a 30-day cancellation thing, mutual. I just talked to the IT department.
Thank you. That concludes my questions, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Ginley, Councilwoman Baker asked whether the money for this contract is included in the prosecutor's office budget.
It is. It's already part of our allocated funds from the council.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions by my colleagues?
Just one question for clarification. It says that the primary goal is to receive ongoing maintenance, monitoring, support, consultation, training, development, and implementation of a customized case management system. So is that all-inclusive service anytime where we go beyond that need, where more training is needed, or maybe more consultation, or how broad is the scope for what we're paying $50,000 a month for?
Yeah, well, it's to maintain the entire system. As far as like going beyond it, like if it was a substantial amount, I'm sure that would have to be negotiated as an amendment. But right now, what we've enjoyed in the last contract period, and we will enjoy in this one, is a constant structured updating of the system as things happen. We are not ever not modernized. That was a question that Councilman Miller had asked about, and I had to research it. But yeah, we're good. This is a good thing for us.
All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, since this is supposed to be starting right at this time, I would like to ask if one of my colleagues would be willing to offer a motion to recommend this resolution under second reading suspension.
I'll make that motion, Nan Baker.
Is
Second.
there a second?
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilwoman Baker, seconded by Councilman Schwan, who I will note is now here for the record. And so is there any further discussion?
I guess I do
Hearing
have,
none?
I actually do. With this only being for the prosecutor's office, I guess my curiosity can't help but ask, what do the public defenders use? Is there a comparable program for, or do they not need that?
I don't know actually what the public defender gets from the county and the state. They're independent of us. This is exclusive to the prosecutor's office.
Exclusive to the prosecutor's office. Okay, I'm just still a little bit unclear about this, but okay, thank you. I'd like to know if someone can. I know it's related to this system, but it just I'm trying to see the parity here. If the public defenders have something similar or comparable, and why we don't use the same service or.
So Trevor, could you follow up with the defender's office and find out and let us all know?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor, so I'm going to call for the question on recommending resolution 2021-0087 to the full council with recommendation to leadership for second reading suspension at the next council meeting. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. So it is unanimously recommended to the next council meeting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And the next item on our agenda is our presentation and discussion regarding the 2020 year-end results of operation report, and to be presented by Director Parfiowitz. And I would like to say publicly that I felt that you put together a very clear and concise report that gave us a very readable summary of the county's current status, and we appreciate your efforts and call upon you now to give us a presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Councilman Miller. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to present the 2020 results of operations. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, can everyone see the screen? Just want to confirm. Okay, so.
Yeah, looking good.
Okay, thank you. Well, I could say it's an understatement to say it's been an unprecedented year. In late March, COVID-19 impacted all of us. The governor, the state auditor, as well as others, warned us to brace ourselves, cut spending in anticipation of revenue loss. We did. We sent staff home, closed county offices. The courts implemented furloughs, hiring freeze, asked departments for budget cuts. The federal government provided CARES Act funding to the county and stimulus payments to the taxpayers. While addressing major issues in the community, we also had to address our own issues. The county lost tax revenue, including sales taxes, bed taxes, admission taxes. Our county hotel occupancy dropped, requiring the general fund to pay a larger portion of debt service and property taxes. Our fees, our charges for services all dropped because the county was closed or to reduce capacity. When it was determined that the county could not use CARES Act funding for revenue loss, we quickly changed our focus. to eligible expenditures, more specifically general fund and health and human service levy fund expenditures that could be charged to the CARES Act. We found and transferred approximately 96 million in eligible expenditures from both the general fund and the health and human service levy fund to the CARES Act fund. These transfers allowed us to reposition ourselves for 2020 and put us on solid ground for 21. Even with the tough year, we managed to get some things done. We went live with the N4 Lawson system. We received an additional 95 million in opioid settlements. We declared an executive order for mission critical purchases to prevent and respond to COVID-19. We received an appropriated $215.5 million in federal CARES Act funding. We funded the ERP for this year. For last year. We replaced and increased the 3.9 mils Health and Human Services levy to a 4.7 mils Health and Human Service levy. We maintained credit ratings of AA stable from S&P Global and AA2 from Moody's Investor Services. We refunded $277.9 million in bonds and resulting in $55.7 million in annual debt service savings from 2020 to 2037. We adopted our 2021 tax budget. We addressed a $7.9 million operating shortfall at the Hilton Hotel. And then finally, we approved our 2021 biennial budget update. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm sorry.
One question on the refunding of the $277 million in bonds. I know that we saved a lot of money, but it $55.7 million annually.
It's debt service over the next 17 years.
That's over the life of the bonds, not on an annual basis.
Correct.
Okay. Correct. That makes more sense, but it's still a huge accomplishment. Thank you.
So with that, I'm going to get right into the general fund.
I just got to say that given the recent uptick that we've seen in interest rates, it turns out that the county's move was very well timed on that refunding.
There's no question about that. No question. Okay, I'm just going to get right into it with the general fund. Okay, this is the operating surplus. For 2020, the general fund ended with an operating surplus of $52.8 million. This includes operating revenue of $453 million and operating expenditures of $315.2 million and subsidies of $85 million. Included in the total operating expenditures are $86.5 million in CARES Act transfers and $2.3 million in furlough savings. Included in the subsidy number is the $19.8 million in one-time use of our cash reserves. We'll go over that in just a second on a future slide.
How much was that, Walter?
19.8 million. It's made up of three pieces. I've got a slide specific to that. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. With that, I'll just move right into revenue and provide some detail. Many of our revenues were down due to COVID-19. Many county offices and courts were closed or operated at a reduced capacity. We ended 2020 with approximately $453 million in the general fund revenue. This is $21.5 million or 4.5% less than budget. Charges for services came in at $86 million. It's $3.9 million or 4.4% under budget. This reduction is primarily due to reduced fees collected by the county. Fines and forfeitures came in at $7.4 million, $1.2 million or 14.2% under budget. This reduction is primarily due to reduced activity in the courts. Interest earnings came in slightly over budget at $15.5 million. Intergovernmental revenue came in at $48.9 million or just $1.2 million under budget. This reduction was due to the public defender expenditures that were not fully reimbursed due to some reporting issues identified by the Ohio public defender.
So on that point, Director, is that due to a problem on our part or is it a state problem?
No, it's a problem on our part. Some of the reports were not submitted timely and others were not accurate.
And is this setback permanent, or can it be corrected and the money recouped?
No, it's permanent now.
And have the problems been corrected so that there won't be any further shortfall of this kind?
I believe they've been corrected. The reports are being submitted timely, and we're using now specifically the Infor or the Lawson system for all of our data rather than relying on the Public Defender's Office and the Infor Lawson data. We're doing it consistently now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Licenses and permits came in at $92,000, which is about 20,000 over, or 27.3%. It's a big percentage, but a small number. Other revenue came in at 22.2 million, which is 5.7 million, or 20.5% under budget. This reduction is primarily the loss of our bed tax revenue. Property taxes came in at 24.4 million, which is 3 million or 11.1 less than budget. This variance is really a reporting issue in our new system. Property tax budget included the homestead credit, but in the new system, the homestead credit is actually reported as intergovernmental revenue. The actual results are reflected in the other revenue number, and we'll correct this going forward.
So if I may, that property tax deficit isn't really a deficit then?
No, not at all. Not at all. It came in right on budget.
Okay.
And then finally, sales taxes, they ended at 248.5 million, which is 6.8 million or 2.7 under budget.
Would you consider that to be within the target range? Because it sounds like the sales tax is not as far off as what we're being warned about almost a year ago.
No, what we were projecting early on based on some of the guidance we received, we were as high as 20%.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So we're down to less than 3%. So
less than 3%. And then the last couple of months have been coming in favorably over what we had budgeted for 2021.
So did we overreact on our cuts?
In many cases, I believe we did.
Thank you.
Walter, if I may, on that sales tax, given that we all lived through this past year and we know that these restaurants are not only shut down, or bars, or every revenue source was then compromised for most of the year, if not all of the year, how can we only be 2.7 down? I mean, 20 seemed over the top, but 2.7 doesn't, you would think that number would be higher.
Oh, I agree 100%. I think without the stimulus money that was provided, I don't think that we would have numbers that look this good.
So the sales tax number has stimulus money in it?
No, I don't think that it has. I just think that the stimulus money is what generated the additional sales taxes. I think the number would have been so much worse had the federal government not provided the stimulus money to taxpayers.
Walter, if I could add, I mean, back when we were going through this, as you know, the state auditor, everybody was telling us to cut 20%, cut now, and hopefully come in better. And we're glad to say that we did, and we did come in better. Without that, $3 trillion being added to the economy, this could have been a lot different. So, we're in a much better position because we did make those cuts.
Okay.
So one thing that I could add is that I know that the auto sales were very strong for the year. One thing, when people got their stimulus checks, good number of people used them to help buy automobiles, and so the automobile sales tax was very strong, and that helped offset some of the reductions in the things that were so visible, like the restaurants and bars.
Well, I think they also used a lot of that money for home renovations and home expenses because people were not traveling, and so you can see it in the price of lumber and everything else. All of those, go to Home Depot, try and find some of your basic supplies. They've been sold out because people have been putting so much money back into their houses when they weren't. So all those are sales taxable transactions.
And if I could add too, it's the unemployment, the extended unemployment funding was huge, obviously keeping people with money to spend. It wasn't just the stimulus checks.
Okay, thanks for the explanations. It's good to know and explain.
Okay, with that, I'm going to move into general fund expenditures. This slide summarizes general fund expenditures by budget line. I just want to remind everyone the slide includes one-time use of reserves, the CARES Act transfers, and the furlough savings. So overall, we ended 2020 with general fund expenditures totaling 400.1 million. This is 124.4 million or 23.7% under budget. Personnel services ended at 192.7, which is 87.8 million or 31.3 under budget. Other expenditures ended at 122.5, which is 36.5 million or 23% under budget. And subsidies, we're basically right on budget with a slight surplus of 36,000. And I'll go over some of the larger department variances on the next slide. So this slide details the general fund expenditures, the variances by department. Approximately 96 million of the 124 variances in county executive departments. 23 million is in elected officials and 5 million is in boards and commissions. What this slide does is highlights the larger surpluses within each group. The major contributors, as you can see, are the sheriff's office and all the courts. Overall, we transferred 86.4 million in general fund operating expenses to the CARES Act. And this combined with vacancies and then the furlough savings and reduced activity in the courts accounted for the remainder of the surplus.
If I may, before we leave, the sheriff's department had a 127 budget, but the
Yes.
actual was 46. That seems quite what accounts for such a drastic change in funding?
Councilman Baker, that's where the majority of our CARES Act transfers occurred.
Okay,
We transferred the majority of corrections officer salaries and deputy salaries to the CARES Act fund.
to the 81 million?
A good portion of the $81 million variance is exactly those transfers.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome. So the next slide is about our reserves. I didn't really do a slide on the subsidies because it was only a $35,000 variance. So I did a slide on these cash balances instead. The reserves on cash balance that were added to the subsidy during the year. We started out with 25.3 as a budget for cash reserves. And then during the year, we added, we added another 7.9 million in Hilton Hotel debt service and taxes for a total of 33.2 million. But during the year, we only paid out the 19.8. So we paid out the economic development Lumen loan of $4 million. We funded the ERP at $7.9 million. And we did pay the Hilton Hotel debt service and property taxes of 7.9 million. So we paid out 19.8 out of the 33.3 that was budgeted. And I guess Councilman Miller, you were asking about the remaining reserves, and we still had the Sherwin-Williams incentive, if you will, and the demolition fund of, I believe, about $5 million.
So, Director, why was the $7 million capital for Hilton Hotel not required to be spent? Do we still owe that money or
No, that's discretionary. It's discretionary for when we do choose to do improvements over in the Hilton Hotel.
Okay, so that was not required in 2020.
No,
Okay.
Okay, I'll move on to the ending cash balance slide for the general fund.
Walter, can I just ask a quick question on that last slide? For the Hilton Hotel, do you have what we benefited or profited in 2019 to contrast with what the COVID-19 did to what we typically would see on this chart?
Generally, we wouldn't see the Hilton Hotel debt service or taxes. That's something that's paid out of the Hilton Hotel operating account. Since their operating account dwindled, we were left with these debt service and tax payments.
Okay, so that line would be just zero.
Oh yeah, it would be zero, because the original budget that was passed, Councilwoman Baker, was at 25.3. It did not include the 7,936,000 in the total.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So this slide summarizes the general fund ending cash balance. We started the year with the beginning cash balance of about $139 million. Operating revenue totaled $453 million. Operating expenditures totaled $315.2 million, and subsidies totaled $85 million. So we ended the year with the cash balance of $191.8 million. This is 47.9 balance to expenditures, and this is in compliance with our code requirement of 25%. There's a couple of asterisks down at the bottom because I wanted it to be clear that CARES Acts and furloughs were included in the operating expenditures, and then the one-time use of reserves were all reflected in the subsidy number. So I'm going to move on. I want to show one more slide because I thought it was important to show this identical slide without the CARES Act transfers and the furloughs impacting the ending cash balance. So you'll see this slide basically mirrors the last slide, budget and actual, but we have $86.5 million in CARES Act transfers, $2.3 million in furlough savings in the general fund. The revised number, if you back the CARE transfers out and the furloughs out, we end up at 103.1 million, which roughly would be 21.1% balance to expenditures rather than the 47.9. I just thought it was important to highlight these numbers, and I'll do the same on the levy side as well.
Wow.
So at this point, I'm ready to move into the Health and Human Service Levy Fund.
Please proceed.
Okay, so roughly, generally, it's just the same format. For 2020, the Health and Human Service Levy Fund ended with an operating surplus of $6.4 million. This includes operating revenue of $235.4 million and subsidies of $229 million. Included in these subsidies are CARES Act transfers of $9.7 million and furlough savings of $3 million.
So, Director, can you explain what the variance in revenue was composed of? I know that part of it is that one payment that we would normally have expected to get before the end of the year didn't come until 2021.
Yes, Councilman Miller, it's the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide.
Okay, fine.
Okay. This slide summarizes the Health and Human Services levy revenue. So overall, Health and Human Services levy revenue ended at $235.4 million, which corresponds to the last slide. It's $8.7 million or 3.6 under budget. So I'm just going to go through it by category. So there's a small variation on charges for services, but intergovernmental revenue came in under budget by $6.7 million. The majority of this variance is due to the timing of the 2020 second half homestead credit. It was $8.7 million and the credit did not post until 2021. I believe it posted in February. Other revenue came in under budget by 3.3 million. And this variance is due to the 4.9 million that was budgeted to be transferred to the general fund. I'm sorry, to be transferred from the general fund to the levy fund, and it was not posted. When we were doing our adjustments, we didn't think that we were going to need the additional $4.9 million. It was budgeted to be transferred from the general fund into the levy.
Walter, are we still transferring money from the general fund to the levy? I thought that was something we were not going to do.
No, we're not doing it any longer. I think we're in good shape. And let me just finish by saying the two levies came in slightly over budget by $1.3 million or just 0.6%.
Okay.
No, we're not transferring from the general fund to the levy.
Okay.
Councilman Miller, did that answer the questions that you had for?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
You're welcome. So at this point, I'd like to move into the Health and Human Service levy subsidies. So the Health and Human Service levy subsidies to the various departments totaled $229 million, which is 21.6 million or 8.6% under budget. So this slide details the major departments that contributed to the savings. So overall, we had a variance of 21.6. I'm detailing the larger ones, the 19.4 here on this slide. The major contributors to the surplus include juvenile court, Health and Human Service Administration, Health and Human Service Child Support, Health and Human Service Senior and Adult Services, Health and Human Services Early Childhood, and Health and Human Services Family and Children First Council. So approximately half of the surplus is due to transfers of 9.7 million in HHS operating expenses to the CARES Act fund and 3 million in savings from the furlough. Juvenile court contributed 5.8 to the surplus by reallocating 1.6 million in personnel costs to reclaim. They also reduced spending on guardian ad litem fees. They delayed rate increases and lowered board and care detention center medical costs. And the remainder of the variance was due to vacancies and overall reduced contract spending in all the departments.
If I may ask, Walter, when we have vacancies and those vacancies aren't filled and that becomes a savings, we see a lot of temporary help, a lot of consulting help. Is that factored in to these numbers?
Yeah, I'm really familiar with the HHS departments because I was the director there for a number of years. We really don't, on that side of the house, we really don't do that.
Okay.
I can't speak for juvenile or the courts, but on the HHS side, we didn't do that at all.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
So, Director, how was the HHS administration able to run without any money?
They ran with federal and state dollars that they received. They didn't require a subsidy this year.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah, just so that everyone keeps in mind that these are just subsidies. So these are after state and federal reimbursements that all the departments would receive. These are the subsidies that backfill the budgets for the portion that's not funded by the state or the federal governments. So following along, I would get into the cash balance next. So to summarize the Health and Human Services levy funds ending cash balance, we started the year with a beginning cash balance of 8.1 million. The Health and Human Services levy revenue totaled 235.4 million. Subsidies to the departments totaled 229 million. We ended the year with a cash balance of 14.4, which is 6.3 balance to expenditures, and it does not meet our 10% requirement. again, I do have another follow-up slide that would show the numbers, these same numbers without CARES Act transfers or the impact of the furlough savings that I would like to show next. So this slide summarizes the Health and Human Services levy fund cash balance without $9.7 million in CARES Act transfers and approximately $3 million in furlough savings. The ending cash balance would have been 1.8 million or just 0.7% balance to expenditures.
So, Director, if we were to assume that we're not going to have to use the reserves on balance that we have for COVID-related expenditures, that those can be covered with the federal assistance that has come in. If we make that assumption, what's your current projection on the year-end 2021 HHS levy balance at the end of the year?
My projection for the 2021 ending cash balance would be $29.7 million or 10.7%.
Okay, and that's
That does meet the code requirement.
it's also about a $15 million increase over what we currently have, which is right on the $15 million target that we needed for the first of the 8 years of the levy to achieve sustainability. So that's encouraging.
Yes.
Walter, is there any concern that as we see ourselves through this pandemic and resources and subsidies from state and federal diminish, that there could be a gap time where we haven't quite been able to generate enough to pay for what it is we need to do to provide services? Or it sounds like that's probably not, because you're predicting a 10% float.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing, there really is nothing that's going to diminish. I haven't seen anything from the state or the federal government that, especially on the HHS side, that would deteriorate our reimbursement, either in the way of percentages or reduced sub-grant agreement allocations that we receive.
Okay, good. All right.
Okay, you may continue.
Okay. Okay, at this point, we're going to move into just some general all funds slides. This is where we're aggregating all funds within the county. So on an all funds basis, we have revenues totaling $1.3 billion. It's 113 million or 7.8% under budget. And you can see the primary contributors to the deficit there. The general fund, 21.5, the levy at 8.7, Board of Developmental Disabilities Fund at 2.8, public assistance at 34.1, and the health insurance fund at 25.5. I have a few descriptors on these if you'd like to hear them.
Okay, let's hear them.
Board of Developmental Disabilities, the $2.8 million, it's really due to the county. The county budget was adopted by council prior to the board's adoption. So there was a difference in Medicaid revenue. It was budgeted higher than what BODD had submitted to us. Public assistance fund being off by 34.1. That is actually reduced federal and state reimbursements due to our transfers of CARES Act and furlough savings combined with vacancies and overall lower spending due to COVID-19. The health insurance fund, 25.5 million. That is due to the impact of the premium holiday. It was not budgeted on the revenue side, combined with lower medical claims, and then the Board of Developmental Disabilities closure of its satellite sites when it privatized. I can move into expenditures if you'd like next.
Yes, please go to expenditures.
Expenditures totaled 1.2 billion, which is 346.6 million or 22.6 under budget. Departments that contributed here are laid out as well. Board of Developmental Disabilities, the Department of Development, Health and Human Services, Human Resources, Juvenile Court, the prosecutor, the various public works departments, and then the sheriff's office. These are all savings on an all funds basis. So this includes general fund in here, this includes levy funds in here, and this also includes special revenue funds.
So if I may understand, so these are savings based on what we receive from outside sources?
No, these are savings when you compare what we budgeted versus what the actual expenses came in at.
Before knowing what any of the subsidies are going to be.
Correct.
And so the reason why Health and Human Services would be 40.9 million ahead is why?
Health and Human Services underspent basically by 40.9 million of the budget that we set for them.
And the reason why they underspent is because they had other funding to use? And
No, these are expenses that we transferred to the CARES Act fund, the furlough savings, the overall vacancies. There were large variances and a lot of contract spending for senior services for the UPK program because daycare centers, senior centers were all closed for that increment of time when COVID was running rampant.
Okay. And human resources, 49.1 million. These are pretty big numbers.
Yeah, 16 million of that is in the hospitalization fund, lower than anticipated medical claims. 11 million is surplus due to also in the human resources fund due to BOD's privatization. We received a $5 million dividend from the Bureau of Workers' Comp, and that combined with CARES Act transfers and furloughs added up quickly.
Okay. Wow. The Public Works, Roads and Bridge, 36, that's another big one.
Oh yeah, there's sanitary at 21.4 and county engineer at 36.8, and this facilities internal service funds at 5.5. These are large scale projects that were really postponed, halted during the CARES Act time. Big projects that did not get completed.
So in that case, that money will be spent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
These are all special revenue funds that will be spent.
And then the sheriff at 92, just because it's a big number.
92 million, Councilwoman Baker, that's really the transfer of the corrections officers and the deputies, the personnel costs for them, charging that to the CARES Act rather than to the general fund and special revenue funds.
That's right. Okay, good. Thank you. Wow.
You're welcome. Yeah, I think the next slide will give a really good picture of our staffing overall and what some of the impacts of the vacancies and things were. So our vacancies from 2019 to 2020. In 2020, our total FTE count ended at 7,240. This is 542 FTEs or 7% less than 2019. And this slide details the most significant decreases. So you see Public Works at 27, Sheriff's Office at 52, the the Department of Health and Human Services at 95, the prosecutor at 14, juvenile court at 23, and Board of Developmental Disabilities at 307. I can't really say Board of Developmental Disabilities is truly vacancies because they went and transitioned to privatized services. So I don't see those staff coming back.
And if I may ask again, then in these vacancies, there were, and I don't see IT listed, which I know they've had a pretty big vacancy.
The number was not that significant. I can send out a slide of the entire county if you'd like.
Wasn't that significant? And how about the consultants that have been hired because of vacancies they couldn't fill, I guess is what we're told.
Well, they would probably, those consultants, if they were hired into the IT department. That's probably why they reduced their overall vacancies.
Right. Right.
With the fact that we are now 7% down, 542 people, what's the likelihood we're going to retain that? From the very beginning of this county government, we said that we were going to find ways of building efficiency and reducing staff. Now that we've got the staff reduced, it seems like this would be a good time to work with these limits. We had talked about 15% or more back 10 years ago, and we were going to get below that 6,000 number. This would seem like this would be an ideal time not to then come back and replace these slots.
I would agree. I mean, the only solid number I think that's there at this point is Board of Developmental Disabilities at 307. That number is due to the privatization of their services. So I don't see those coming back, but the remainder, I think your comment is fair.
Well, and I know one of our colleagues has been talking about a buyout. Well, essentially for all intents and purposes, we have gone through this with the reduction of staff of 7%. This would go a long way towards the buyout numbers that people were talking about. And by reducing the staff, it seems like we should not go back.
Agreed.
So it's a blessing as far as one thing positive that we as a county can find as a result of the pandemic. Do you know if that's the administration's point of view also?
Well, I know from my own interactions with our chief of staff that he's sort of holding the line on the vacancies. He requires everything to be justified before he'll approve any replacement of any staff.
It seemed like this would be a good time to administer a freeze at this point in time.
If you add those up, except for the BODD, it's 211 vacancies. Half of that, almost half, is HHS. Is there any, are these departments having difficulty hiring? Is there a lack of services provided because they don't have the personnel, or are these truly vacancies that will sit and not be, how important are these?
Oh, I think the HHS, from my own perspective, those are caseworkers, those are child support officers, those are social service workers that deal with child welfare and the seniors. I think that those positions, a good number of those would probably have to be replaced, but at the same time, those positions come with a fair amount of reimbursement from the state and federal governments.
Right, that's true. And the sheriff's office, that 52, that's another big number. Is that a number that they are?
I would guess that that's a corrections officer number. Correction officers and deputies. I can check into that to find out exactly what the 52 is. I don't have the detail on it at this point. I'll make a note.
One thing to diminish the vacancies if we can, but if, the correction officers or social workers, it's that may be difficult to do.
I think it's important to note, though, that the chief of staff, like Walter indicated, if there's a valid need, he will continue to move forward. So there's a need, the departments just need to speak up and work with Bill.
Yeah. Okay.
think though, one of the things that we've noticed though is the county has reduced the number of people within the county itself during this 10 to 12 year period of time, and then whether or not there's been a reduction in demand for some of these services too. It would reflect less staff needed.
Yeah, a lot of the HHS departments are doing things a little bit differently. On the Job and Family Services side, they're doing their call center where employees are being able to work from home, and what they're finding is that they're more productive, which may result in a fewer number of caseworkers that are needed in that area.
And
Kevin
I've-
Gottman actually has the statistics on that.
the other thing too, Walter, I noticed as well in my fiscal department, when people retired, I just reallocated certain staff that were being underutilized. And I think this was a great opportunity with COVID to really address some of those issues. So.
No, it's really, I think in a lot of respects, giving Councilman Schron credit. I mean, it's more or less a right sizing.
Well, and the risk is that people are going to go back and want to fill those slots in, almost like Councilwoman Baker is suggesting, and I hope we don't do that. It's my belief that once you've downsized and you reallocate, you find out, well, maybe we can do it without 10-15% more of the staff that we have. My hat's off to the chief of staff for holding the line on this.
Okay, if you'd like, I'll move on. We did prepare a CARES Act slide based on our last discussions. I believe Councilwoman Baker asked for some more detail on CARES Act. So I tried to summarize all the CARES Act money that we received as a county. So we received approximately $381 million in various CARES Act funding for a variety of purposes. Just going down the list, we got $215 million as a county to navigate the impact of COVID-19. We got $128 million in pass-through funds to the municipalities, $25.5 million in emergency rental assistance that's being administered by the Department of Development, $7.6 million in community development block grant coronavirus funding that also the Department of Development is administering. We received $2.9 million in an emergency solutions grant for the Department of Development and Homeless Services to work in collaboration. We received $487,000 in another emergency solutions pass-through grant from the state of Ohio, specifically for homelessness. We received $157,000 in CARES money as an airport grant for public works for the county airport. $58,000 in supplemental relief equipment funding for the sheriff, and $78,000 emergency management performance grant for public safety.
Thank you for that. That really gives us a nice picture to see collectively what we have received. Is there anticipated to receive additional funds, or do you think we've seen what we're going to be getting?
Well, I think on this side, we've seen what we're gonna be getting, but for 2021, we have been notified about the $241 million in rescue money that we should be receiving, and we should receive our first increment soon. Should be about $120 million. That's supposed to be issued to us in 2 installments. One was at the once the bill was approved, and then 12 months later, we would receive the second half. That's basically the allocation that I know about at this point.
And do we know what we're going to be doing with the $241 million? Is that targeted dollars?
I haven't seen anything, to be honest with you.
We need additional guidance too. We're still waiting for some of the, fine tuning of the language, Councilwoman Baker.
Okay. So that 381 million can turn into another 241 million.
Exactly.
And that's only for 2021. There's more coming in 2022.
Correct. Well, it's $241 million, I believe, for the 2-year period,
Yeah.
and we're going to receive it in half. So we'll receive the first half soon, and then a year from now, we'll get the second half.
Got it.
But as long as we use the funds within categories as indicated, those funds that are currently being supported by general dollars, we are free to move them to other general dollars activities.
I would assume that, yes, similar to what we did with the CARES Act funds.
Right. So now what we're looking at is, as Ms. Baker pointed out, we're looking at an excess of over $500 million, $500 million.
Right.
Is that a correct interpretation?
I believe that's a correct interpretation, but I think
And yet the taxpayers, we just passed the largest tax increase in the county's history just in less than a year ago. So is there an opportunity for us to find some way to help benefit the local taxpayers from what we've done here, or what has occurred because this money is come from unexpected sources?
I would agree with your statement, Councilman Schramm.
I mean, it seems to me we don't want government benefiting should not be the only benefit of this program. It should also be the taxpayers who are supporting county government.
Oh, absolutely. I think overall our numbers reflected the CARES Act money we received in 2020. I believe it's almost an even split. 50% we spent on county operational type expenses, and the other 50% went out into the community.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jack. Really, we need to really think that through. Is there a deadline on these dollars? Do they need to be spent, the 120 million, by the end of the year, or?
That I haven't seen. I just understand that it's being issued to us for a 2-year increment.
And more guidance will be coming, Councilwoman Baker, to help clarify it. And just like we did with the last, we'll look at every opportunity to help the residents and the businesses. And obviously if there's legal ways to help the county, we'll look at that as well. So we're just waiting for the money and the additional guidance.
I hope that we project good stewardship and not just fill up open slots with these dollars for activities just to be opening them because we have the money in the pocket. I mean, this would be a great time to find a way to maybe go back to the taxpayers who are writing the checks to us and provide them with some kind of a relief.
Well, as we are, and I just saw a memo before this meeting reimbursing some of the furlough dollars because of the excess dollars that were unanticipated. This could follow the same logic. It's a good point. I think it deserves that conversation.
Chairman Miller, can we make sure that this stays on the agenda? This aspect of this $500 million that looks like it's truly a windfall to the county.
Yes, I think that there's a number of options to be considered.
And not all should be spending it.
I would also note that although we don't have the exact guidance, it's clear that the new money that we're receiving from the federal government allows spending for certain kinds of infrastructure and broadband and stuff like that. So that might create some opportunities to do some things that we in the past just haven't been able to find money for. So that's out there as well.
And the opportunity perhaps sharing it back with our taxpayers.
Understood. So we will certainly keep all these things on the agenda. In this committee, I plan to lead a regular process of monitoring the county's expenditures and the overall strategy. So we're going to keep these things on the table.
Councilman Miller, I have one final slide, just a summary of the opioid mitigation fund.
Okay.
So this slide summarizes the $118.5 million in opioid settlement funds that Cuyahoga County received in 2019 and 2020. You'll see that it's followed with 2020 appropriations of $30 million and spending of only 4.8 million. And we ended the year with $113.7 million remaining in the fund. Do have a note that with the creation of the diversion center, it's expected that the spending will increase in 2021.
Of that 113 million, how much do they think that the diversion center is going to take away from that amount?
I don't have the number for the diversion center, but we issued last year $30 million in appropriations. We only spent 4.8, so I would guess that there's $25 million in encumbrances remaining on that funding. So
Right.
we can do an analysis of that as well, just to show on a department by department basis what's remaining and for what purpose.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of money remaining balance.
There's a lot of money, yeah.
To break that down would be good.
Okay, I got a note to do that.
So, Director, I'm glad that Ms. Baker brought up about the reimbursement of the furlough money. As the note I saw was that the estimated cost was 12 million. Can you tell us how much of that would be general fund and how much of that would be HHS levy, and also how much of that, if any, would be reimbursable through federal assistance?
Council Miller, I would have to do an analysis on that. The 12.6 was a quick extract out of our system, and in a lot of respects, that included some departments that were not participating in the furloughs, so that those need to be backed out of there. And then I would segregate those by general fund and HHS levy and apply the appropriate reimbursement percentages. I'm
Okay, well, I would
not ready to do that just yet, but I can get it together. We already started preparation of our fiscal agenda. We plan to submit it as a separate item for council to review. I'll be sure that the agenda contains all the information.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you think, Walter, that maybe we should have done that analysis to make sure that we know where the funds are coming from before we made the announcement? I mean,
Well,
one thing if it's the CARES Act dollars, but it's another if it's not.
in this case, I think that's still an open area of discussion as to how it's going to be paid.
Well, it's not going to be the CARES Act because the CARES Act is almost fully spent, but it will be, the savings where we took it from last year. So if it's general fund or special revenue or HHS, I think that's what we're going back to.
I guess I would just ask that the CARES Act funding did equal in excess of the 12.6, which I know Walter just said that some of that wasn't CARES Act dollars. So there wasn't any exchange of dollars there. I don't know. I would just think we would know exactly where those dollars are coming from before we make an announcement that we're going to reimburse.
We can put it together.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I understand that this was the last slide. We thank you for the presentation, and I would ask my colleagues if they have any further questions on anything that we've heard.
Nope.
I would just mention that we're about a month and a half out from the time that we usually do the first quarter review. The year-end review came in a little bit later than is typical because of some technical difficulties that had to be overcome. So usually around the middle of May, we do the review of the first quarter results of operations, and hopefully at that time we'll have some good information about the federal and we'll have some information on how we're trending in 2021, and so we'll be able to have a little better information to make some decisions about what our strategies are going to be going forward. So, anything else, my colleagues?
No,
Okay, well,
Thanks,
Director,
Walter.
thank you very much for the presentation. It gives us a lot of good information, and we'll keep all these things in mind going forward and continue to monitor it closely.
You all.
So the only other thing on our agenda is miscellaneous business. Does anyone have any miscellaneous business? Hearing none, and there being nothing further that requires our attention, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for your time and attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.